I love how Leon here is wearing the same jacket he has in RE4, but this time it's not brown, but navy blue. This may just be me, but I have a feeling that this choice is very deliberate there. Leon seems to be wearing black when he is at his lowest. In Resident Evil 4 and movies like Vendetta or Damnation, Leon is mostly wearing black when he's drinking or visibly depressed. RE4, both the original and both the remake, is canonically the second time we see him. He was forced to work for the US government. He has lost his mentor. He was separated from a child he had promised to protect. He saw what happened to Raccoon City. He considers his real persona dead. Whenever Leon is wearing blue, he seems to be doing better. He's happier, more emotionally stable, less apathetic and numb. Compare Leon from Death Island to Leon in Vendetta, and you'll see a big difference. Navy blue is also the color of his police uniform he has in RE2. Next to Leon's shoes, you can find few interesting elements. The Clockwork Castellan from RE4 Remake, which is basically a collectible. Handgun ammo, Blue Herb and Lion Medallion from RE2 Remake. I'm actually working on a video about the lion statue, so I won't say much now. But Consternation Evolved has a pretty good video about this. I highly recommend this. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. All you have to know that the lion medallion can be obtained by solving a puzzle found in the lion statue. The lion statue represents Leon, as lions typically represent loyalty, courage, and royalty. Leon is actually symbolized by the lion a few times in the series, not just in RE2. If you think about this, the fur on Leon's coat kind of resembles the mane of a lion. It's a nice little detail if you ask me. The black straps and leather behind Leon is supposed to represent the black trench coat of Mr. X in RE2 Remake. Once you look at the full picture though, you will realize that characters are organized by the level of trust or sympathy. Leon is next to Claire. Claire is between two people she trusts the most, Leon and her brother Chris. Claire's postcard is also pretty interesting to me, considering she's literally wearing a corset, which is very reminiscent of the vest she has in Code Veronica. If we are getting a Code Veronica remake, I'm here for that. Character design-wise, this outfit is perfect. It keeps the spirit of Claire, her personality, yet feels fresh at the same time. It's nice to see her wearing something different than a red jacket and skinny jeans. Also, that's a personal opinion, but I think the gold ornaments suit Claire the best out of the bunch, considering she had worn clothes with flashy prints on them. The gold ornaments can also be seen on Chris, Leon's, and Ada's postcards, which is interesting considering all four characters have deep and or pretty complicated relationships with each other. Claire's design in the postcards seems to take a lot from her design we have seen in Resident Evil 2. There's the necklace, the zippers, and her hair are brown. Moreover, near her feet you can find few elements that can only be found in RE2. There is the Mr. Raccoon collectible, wooden board, red herb, and heart key, and what I think is the unicorn medallion. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure whether this is the unicorn medallion, but it's safe to say that it is, considering Leon has the lion medallion. Unicorn medallion can be obtained from the unicorn statue. Unicorns symbolize different things depending on the culture and context, but historically, they used to represent strength and healing. Claire's presence is healing for characters like Sherry. She's gentle, but she's courageous. In medieval times, it was believed that unicorns can only be met by the purest maidens. Purity, innocence, and uncorrupted good nature has been always associated with children. Unicorns also represent both masculine and feminine energies, which is, I think, interesting, considering Claire is shown to be a bit of a tomboy. She shows both traditionally masculine traits like courage and honesty, but also feminine ones like compassion, relying on emotions. I think the inclusion of the heart key is also very interesting. Can only be obtained in Claire's story in Resident Evil 2, but I think there is just more to it than just that. The shape of the key represents Claire's emotional nature. Hearts typically symbolize feelings and emotions, and like I said before, Claire is not afraid to act on emotions. In Claire's stories, you'll find this, let's call it, subtle theme of love. She comes to Raccoon City in search of her brother, whom she loves. She flirts with Leon. She cares for Sherry like a guardian angel, or a mother caring for her beloved child. In Code Veronica, you'll find some steamy moments between her and Steve. In Resident Evil Degeneration, Claire shows some sympathy, or maybe even a tiny bit of attraction towards Frederick Downing. Wooden boards in Resident Evil 2 are used to cover the windows, so random zombies won't attack the player. You use wooden boards to defend yourself as a player. Claire is a character that often takes the role of a defender. In TerraSafe, her role is to investigate the potential outbreak sites. More often than not, she ends up being the defender of people who can't defend themselves. Mostly children, people like Sherry, or Rani, or Moira even. While Leon's spouse references the Easter egg from original Resident Evil 4, Claire's spouse seems to be communicating something. She's kind of mirroring the pose of Leon, yet at the same time she's sitting close to Chris, almost like she's relying on him. At the same time, her right hand is close to Leon, but I'm not sure whether she's blocking him, reaching to him, or simply mirroring his pose. I will leave this one to you. The most mysterious elements in Claire's postcard is the black stars. The one with those white dots on it. If you ask me, it kind of looks like a night sky with shining stars on it. Historically, stars were used for guidance and navigation, and Claire is kind of a guide for characters like Sherry. Stars may also be related to the Stars team. Claire is close to Chris, who was a part of the Stars. Claire also knows other people who used to be part of the aforementioned group. She knows Jill, she knows Rebecca, she knows Barry and his family, and she personally met Wesker. Black is also a color worn on funerals. It's associated with death, and we know that Claire had seen a lot. I've mentioned before that Leon wears black as a sign of grief, so maybe Claire does the same. I mean, she almost lost Chris, she almost lost Sherry, and she definitely lost Steve. Claire is someone who knew Leon before his metamorphosis. She knows the rookie cop Leon and the government agent Leon. Claire is also the only character who's wearing ripped jeans. And I think that makes sense. She's the youngest of the bunch. During the events of RE2, she's just a 19-year-old. She's just entering the adulthood. She's not graceful like Jill, or suggestive and actively using her looks like Ada. She's practical, she does everything that makes her feel comfortable. She's ready to jump into action, and she's the most practical, let's say. The monster behind Claire is the Licker, a type of zombie found in RE2. Which is kinda weird because every character has a meaningfully chosen enemy on their postcard, and Claire just has some random zombie NPC? Really? Instead of a Licker, we should have gotten Birkin. Claire literally saved his daughter. It has been pointed out that Chris is wearing the scarf that Pierce Nivens, someone Chris was a mentor of, has in Resident Evil 6, and that's some great attention to detail if you ask me. It suits Chris as a character that is tragic in a way. In every single game, or a movie, he loses someone. He already lost Pierce, Ethan, his parents, the STARS team, and he nearly lost Rebecca and Jill. Chris is not the deepest character in RE, but this simplicity really works for him. But in stories where Chris is the main character, or at least a very important one, we don't see him going through a lot of character development like other characters. He doesn't go through big changes, and he doesn't have a long backstory or complicated motivation. I'd say that even his haircut is simple and supposed to lean into the simplicity. Chris wants to save everyone and help everyone, without the mental cost that Leon paid. Chris's outfit seems to be taking a lot from his design we've seen in Resident Evil Village. Except this one has a subtle shade of dark green instead of black. Chris has been wearing green since his first appearance, but the green on his postcard is way darker, while the clothes he usually wears in games are more muted and lighter. Like I said before, Chris seen on the postcard, design-wise, takes a lot from his design in RE8. Darker colors are usually seen as more masculine. Black masks blood and injuries. Black is also a color of mold and grief. So for me, the color choice here is like a blend of his old character and the Chris we've seen in Village. Or I guess it may be a simple choice that is supposed to make him look fancy and elegant. I don't know. One thing we have to look at is the shape language. In art, simple shapes like circles, triangles, or squares carry a universal meaning. Circles represent joy, change, softness, and positivity. Triangles are associated with danger, sharp edges, dynamic nature. Okay, so I think I forgot to mention something important. Shape language and media that has more complex and realistic art styles is usually subtle. More visible shapes can be mostly found in 2D animation, where characters' design should be simple and easy to read. Animating few frames in 2D may take a lot of time, and it will take even more time if your character design is overly complex. And that's not even mentioning the cleanup, checking up for animation mistakes, coloring this, and maybe even adding some shadows if you're extra. Squares and rectangles often represent stability, calm, and simple nature, which I think fits Chris well. I mean, his pose literally resembles a square. He's like a rock that Jill and Claire, two characters who are closest to him, rely on. And we know that Jill, as his partner, and Claire, as his sister, are probably the closest people he had in his life. He's like a rock for them to rely on. A rock or a boulder, I guess. I've mentioned before that Chris's outfit seems to take a lot from his design in Village, which can be also said about his coat, but I can't say that this is not similar to whatever Leon is wearing. By the way, do you know how jackets like these are called? Those are shearling coats, often made from animal skin. So that's materials like leather, sheepskin, or lambskin. Shearling, as a material, is made from wool. In Resident Evil 4 Remake, he and Ashley are often compared to sacrificial lambs. Animals like lambs, sheep, and goats, sometimes cows, were used as sacrificial animals. While RE4 plays with the idea of Leon and Ashley being a life-offering sacrificial lambs, I think in Chris's case, the shearling may be a nod to his role of a shepherd, a leader. He was a mentor of Pierce Nivens in RE6, and he is the leader of this team in Resident Evil Vendetta. And he is the leader of the Wolfhound squad. Shepherds symbolize protection, guidance, and leadership. In Chris's postcard you can see shotgun shells, which is interesting. Mr. Everywhere, a collectible from RE7, 2 green herbs, which we will talk about later, shells, the Goat of Warding, a collectible from RE Village, and BSAA emblem. Since Mr. Everywhere and the Goat of Warding are there, my question is, where is Ethan? Ethan was the protagonist of 2 mainline games, which also include Mr. Everywhere and the Goat of Warding as a collectible. What happened in his games, and to himself, finally, is actually quite meaningful to the whole series, so I just don't understand why didn't he get his postcard? I just think this is a missed opportunity. Ethan is maybe not the deepest or the most interesting character, but just the fact that his face is never explicitly shown is so intriguing to me. I could think of a dozen ways that his face could be hidden. Next, we got Jill. Firstly, this postcard is my favorite. It's pretty, it's beautifully drawn, and Jill's outfit is great, and I think it suits her so well. I love this. I also like the fact that Jill's blue is lighter than the blue that Leon wears, so the contrast in their signature colors is bigger than the contrast we've seen in Death Island. In fact, Jill's blue is almost white. In art, white is the color that symbolizes purity and innocence. Jill is constantly portrayed as heroic and selfless, uncorrupted by greed. Jill's outfit is also very feminine and graceful, which I think is a nod to the older Jill, let's say. In games that came out before RE3 Remake, Jill is more emotional. She's calm, but she's emotional, she's empathetic. The new Jill is colder. She's less expressive and more collected than Jill we have seen in games that came out before RE3 Remake. Older Jill is more graceful and feminine. But I think this design right here takes a lot from both her old design and new design. Pants, gloves, and I think the belt are something that the remake Jill has. But the corset? This one is probably inspired by the corset top she has in the original game. By the way, it looks great. I love the ruffles and I love the lace. Jill also has something that looks to me like a veil or a cape. Cape might be a nod to her heroic nature, but let's focus on the veil aspect, let's say. It might not be a traditional veil, but I think it resembles one, so let's go with that. Veiling is a common practice in many religious or religious denominations. I'm mentioning this specifically because Resident Evil has its fair share of religious references. In the first Resident Evil game, where Chris and Jill are the protagonists, you can find Bible scriptures. Jill has a text from a gospel engraved on her necklace, and she has this necklace not only in RE3 remake, but also Defiant and this postcard. In the original RE3 Nemesis, when Jill is infected, she's laying on the altar in the church. The monster behind Jill is, of course, Nemesis. Interestingly, the shape of the Nemesis is very circular, resembling a halo. Halo in religious iconography represents a person who is a saint. Even Resident Evil Village plays with this element a bit. Like I said before, Resident Evil has its fair share of religious and spiritual references, and I think that a lot of them, if not just most of them, relate to Jill in some way. This may be far-fetched, but Jill shares few similarities with Saint Joan of Arc. Both women share the same nationality. Joan of Arc was French, and Jill has a French father and a Japanese mother, according to RE1 concept art. Both women are seen as heroic. Joan of Arc is always illustrated in armor, and Jill is always wearing some form of practical suit, and even her outfit in original RE3 Nemesis kind of resembles armor. It may just be me though. Joan of Arc is always illustrated with short hair, and Jill's most iconic haircut is this one. Joan of Arc is probably the most well-known female knight, and according to Resident Evil Wiki, Jill was the only woman in the STARS team for 2 years before Rebecca joined. She was also the only woman in the Delta Force training. What I think is a nice detail are those tentacles. They reference Nemesis, and they look like a rays of a shining sun. Sun may also represent rising hope, so I get it ties nicely to the themes of RE9. If you didn't know, the virus of RE9 is Elpis. Elpis roughly translates to hope in Greek, and according to Greek mythology, it was the last thing that was found at the bottom of Pandora's box. I'm not saying that Jill is coming back, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she actually came back. Jill also has few things near her shoes, like other characters, but this time we won't talk too much about them, because there is really nothing much to say about them. There are, of course, the bolt cutters you use to obtain the shotgun, and there's the gunpowder, because there's gunpowder in the game. There's also Charlie, a collectible figure. Collecting all Charlies gets you an achievement, but that's it from what I know. Like I said before, those items don't have much significance if it comes to the story. Gameplay-wise, yes, but I think that giving Jill something like a lockpick or a vaccine or a suitcase would be more fitting. Having said that, I still love this postcard. Those elements aren't a big deal for me. The focus of the artwork is Jill and her outfit anyway. Next, we got Grace, the protagonist of upcoming RE9. Her outfit isn't as fancy as outfits of other characters. I mean, sure, there are some golden details here and there, but her outfit isn't something fresh or unique. Rather, it's just a more elegant interpretation of the design we've seen in the trailers. Interestingly, the shoes that Grace has look very similar to the shoes that Claire has. Grace's collar looks like the collars of the jackets that Leon and Chris have. And just now I saw that Grace's haircut looks very similar to the haircut that Jill has. And I'm gonna be honest there. When it was mentioned that in RE9 we will see a familiar face, I was pretty sure it's gonna be Jill. Like, everyone knew they were talking about Leon, and I was pretty sure that Leon will be there. But Jill was also a very fitting choice for RE9. I won't say much now about it, since I've got a Tumblr post which explains my overall thinking. If you want to check it out, then it's here. It's outdated, of course, because, for example, the hooded man was confirmed to be an entirely different character. It's not Nikolai. And the voice I mentioned doesn't belong to Jill but Alyssa. But I vividly remember that a few months back, everyone was saying something about a game with a female protagonist, Jill and Leon working together, and it was before RE9 was announced. Again, take my theory with a grain of salt, but I think that Jill will be at least mentioned. She's a character who's very important to the overall story of Raccoon City, so I do certainly believe that maybe she will come back, at least for a moment. Near Grace's feet you can see first aid spray and a grey Mr. Raccoon. According to Resident Evil Wiki, first aid spray restores full health. However, in Resident Evil Outbreak, a game where Alyssa appears, first aid spray can't cure the infection or poison. And that's interesting, considering Leon is shown to be infected. If this is a cleverly hidden piece of foreshadowing, then I gotta say, this was quite an interesting choice to foreshadow it like this. At the current moment I cannot confirm anything because Resident Evil 9 hasn't came up yet. However, this also may be just a coincidence. And I'm saying this because I don't think Leon will die in RE9. He simply brings too much money. So many people just grew up playing RE4 and other Resident Evil games that killing Leon would be like shooting yourself in the foot. This character has brought so many fans to the series that no one will be happy if he actually dies. I don't want this video to be so centered on Leon, but I think it's nice to mention that I don't think Leon will die and I don't think he should die. I'm gonna take a wild guess and just say that if Leon at some point of the game dies, he will come back. Bonus points if he comes back in the same game and it turns out he's actually safe and sound. The whole marketing for this game currently is Leon is cooked. Guys, Leon's gonna die. So for me that's a dead giveaway he isn't actually going to. The grey Mr. Raccoon is a mystery to me. It looks like a piece of paper that someone has cut out of a newspaper, but it also might be a figure that hasn't been colored, or maybe lost the color due to sun exposition. If this is a metaphor of Leon losing his, I don't know, real persona or soul or humanity, then I think it's interesting to say. Of course, this may mean nothing, but Grace isn't the only character who has a Mr. Raccoon on their postcard. Claire is right there. My theory is that the grey Mr. Raccoon may be a collectible figure. What's interesting is that no other element appears 2 times in the same, entire art piece. It's just the Mr. Raccoon. Maybe what I'm saying is too far-fetched, and maybe I'm looking into this too much, but honestly, I just want to see Claire again. What I think is interesting is the fact that Grace is between Jill and Ada. Out of every single character, Grace is the closest to them. Jill and Ada, from what we know, never met before, but they share a few similarities. They were born the same year, and they were in the Raccoon City in a very similar time. Carlos, someone very close to Jill, shares a lot of traits with Leon, who, during the Raccoon City incident, worked with Ada. Ada worked with Leon, just like Carlos worked with Jill. Both women kind of trap Grace in a frame, and they have similar poses. Jill and Ada also have contrasting color palettes. Jill's blue is very light, while Ada's crimson is darker and more saturated. Part of me wants to say that both women kind of represent different paths, but this seems very far-fetched even for me, so I'm leaving this one to you. The monster behind Grace is, of course, the stalker enemy. Nothing to add here. I'm actually puzzled about the black stripes on her shirt. Are those just details without a meaning? That are just supposed to look good? Or are they actually meaningful? Grace's main color seems to be yellow, which is interesting. In the trailers and teasers, Grace's blonde hair are the most visible elements of her design. Like she's a beam of light and hope in a place surrounded by darkness and ruin. Grace is, interestingly, the only protagonist who utilizes yellow and brown in her design. Her clothes might be brown, but her hair are blonde, so I guess brown and yellow are kind of similar. I can think of any Resident Evil character who mostly wears yellow. There's of course Ashley, but she is not the protagonist. She's a side character, and you play as her for only a short segment. Grace is supposed to be the main hero. Yellow symbolizes new beginnings, hope and light. Grace's yellow may also be seen as a force that brings justice and morality to a place that is synonymous with moral decay, greed and corruption. In Resident Evil 9 we're coming back to Raccoon City, right? RC is the same place that was blown up to cover the ties between Umbrella Corporation and the US government. Raccoon City was always known to be a shithole. The crime rate was high, a weird corporation had ties to the government, and the government was actually quite corrupted from what I know. The mayor of Raccoon City, Michael Warren, left the city when outbreak started, leaving his daughter, Catherine, in the city. You know, Catherine, the same woman that was later killed by a serial killer, who also happens to be the chief of police department. People who are supposed to be upstanding symbols of hope are the ones who contribute to the moral decay of the city. Do you guys remember Infinite Darkness? That series was literally about the US government covering up its crimes. The main antagonist of RE9 doesn't strike me as someone who would try to, try to leak the information of said crimes, kind of finishing what Claire started. But I think that it's interesting to think that US agent and an FBI agent are at the same place at the same time. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say maybe this political theme will be actually explored using Grace's character. But that's just a theory, I guess. Lastly, we got Ada. In her outfit you can see tiny roses, which I think are very fitting. At the end of the day, she's supposed to be a seductive femme fatale. The gold chains are interesting to me. They might be just another insignificant detail, which was added just to look pretty, but they're interesting nevertheless. They don't tie her to anything. They are part of her dress, while Jill's chain literally ties her to the ground. Leon also has a chain around his neck, which looks like a collar if you want to think about it this way. Of course, this might be just an insignificant detail, but if you want to think about it deeply, then I guess we can say that this chain may represent being tied to his trauma or his government agent job. Since both Ada and Leon have those chains, they also may represent their complicated relationship. But again, they might be just here for decoration. If you think about it, Ada shares a lot of traits with Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman from Batman. They have similar haircuts. They both use grappling hooks, shown to be pretty athletic. In a lot of stories surrounding Selina, if not just most of them, Catwoman is a mercenary or a spy. I'm mentioning this specifically because in media like Batman the Animated Series, she's more of an anti-hero. But in comics like Batman Hush, for example, Selina is a mercenary, just like Ada. Both women share the same trait of a femme fatale. And I'm mentioning this specifically because Ada, in her postcard, literally mirrors the pose of a stretching cat. Cats have always been linked to femininity and independence. In some cultures, cats represent fertility, good luck, and protection, which I think it's interesting to say at least. In some cultures, especially Asian ones, cats represent wealth, which is surprisingly fitting. Annette mentions that Ada wants to get the virus sample and sell it to whoever pays the most. The monster behind Ada is, of course, Simmons. The cloud symbols on Ada's waist are called Xiangwin. I'm sorry if I butchered the pronunciation. I am not Chinese. Those clouds are also called auspicious clouds. And according to Wikipedia, they are a symbol of good luck and peace. My best guess is that the cloud symbol here is a nod to Ada's seemingly Chinese nationality. I said seemingly because Ada Wong is a fake name. Ada's real name, backstory, and nationality are unknown. On Ada's postcard you can also see Flash Grenade, which is, I think, a nod to her nature as someone who appears and disappears quickly whenever she wants to and whenever she has to. Many people already discussed the flowers that you can see on character postcards, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, let's focus on the herbs, which are visible in every single art piece. Leon has a blue herb, which I think is a nod to his main color, blue. If Leon isn't wearing some shade of black, he's wearing navy blue. Navy blue is also the color of his police uniform. In games, blue herb is used to cure poison. If you want to think about this metaphorically, maybe Leon wants to cure the world out of the metaphorical poison that is bioterror? I guess it makes sense. Claire has the red herb. Red herb on its own does nothing, but it's powerful when paired with other herbs. For example, green herb and red herb mixed together fully restore health. If we assume that green herb actually represents Chris, because green is Chris's main color, and the red herb represents Claire, then we got a pretty clear message. Redfield siblings are a great duo. Red herb mixed with blue herb give you damage resistance and poison immunity. Interestingly, it only works in Resident Evil 2 remake, where Claire and Leon are the protagonists. If we assume that the blue herb is supposed to remove toxins, and the red herb is supposed to give a damage resistance, then I think it might be a reference to this scene in Resident Evil Degeneration.
I'm gonna scrub this virus from the face of the earth. You chose the role of rescuer rather than fighter like me. You chose a path that your brother and I couldn't follow. You weren't wrong.
Leon fights terror physically, while Claire does it by offering help to the victims of said bioterror. Green herb mixed with red herb and blue herb restores health and cures poison. Blue is the associated color of Leon and Jill. Red is associated with Claire. Green represents Chris. The green color may also represent Rebecca, so I think the message is pretty clear. Especially when we consider that in the last movie, Defiant, the Core 4 and Rebecca are working together at the same time. Actually, if you think about this, Rebecca is also quite an important character. She was the protagonist of RE0, and she was in 2 movies. So I guess Rebecca at this point is the part of the cool kids club. Green is Chris' associated color. He wears clothes which are green or have a greenish tone. Green symbolizes nature and healing. Chris's presence is healing to a lot of characters. Chris and Rebecca are 2 people who I think mostly helped Leon with overcoming his alcoholism. And Chris is the one who saved Jill in RE5. Chris is the guy who tries to make Jill feel better in the Defiant movie when she is noticeably haunted by her memories. His presence in Code Veronica is very important to Claire. Green herb is the most basic healing item in every game and can be mixed with pretty much every other herb. Which is, I think, a nod to the fact that Chris has at least one game when he's working alongside rest of the Core 4. I've already described how green and red herb mix may symbolize Chris and Claire, so I'm not gonna repeat myself. However, green and blue herb mixed together cure poison and add health. Again, Leon refers to himself and Chris as fighters. Outside of this line, Chris and Leon work together in Vendetta. Interestingly, both herbs are close to postcards that represent Jill and Claire, which makes sense since Chris is very close to both women, and both women are very important to him. Interestingly, Jill has a yellow herb. Not blue, yellow. Yellow herbs are only usable with green herbs or with green and red herb mixed together. In Resident Evil 4, green and yellow herbs mixed together restore some health and set a higher health limit. So let's say hypothetically that yellow here represents Jill. Green and yellow makes sense since Jill and Chris have been partners and friends for so long. And one of Chris's green herbs is close to her postcard. For yellow herb may be mixed with green and red herb and it can be sold at the merchant. This is probably a stretch, but this may be a reference to this undergoing theme of greed in Resident Evil 3 Remake. Again, this may be a stretch, so take my theory with a grain of salt. Grace has yellow and green herbs on her postcard. Grace is a fairly new character, and her game hasn't even came out yet, so this might be another cleverly hidden piece of foreshadowing. I've mentioned before, color yellow may symbolize new beginnings, and green represents growth. Take that as you will. Yellow herb may also be a reference to Grace's blonde hair. Interestingly, Grace and Jill are the only characters who have yellow herbs on their postcards, and I'm not sure whether this is a coincidence or not. Ada, of course, has a red herb on her postcard, which is probably just a nod to her main color. Red herb on its own does nothing, and cannot be used alone, so I think it may be a reference to the fact that Ada was never a protagonist in any of the games. Sure, you play her for short segments of time, but she was never a protagonist per se. Ada also usually works alone. She may work for others, and she may use other people to get what she wants, but in general, she works alone. Once again, I would like to thank Inka for this amazing fanart. A link to her Insta is in the description if you'd like to check it out. I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you for your time.